Black Doom is the primary antagonist of the 2005 video game Shadow the Hedgehog. He's the leader of an alien species known as the Black Arms, and was directly involved with the creation of Project Shadow. Throughout the game, Black Doom will watch over Shadow's actions, and will be constantly trying to get him to do his bidding. Depending on the player's choices, Shadow can either rebel or obey. Either way, Black Doom's desire for world destruction and constant manipulation of Shadow the Hedgehog is something we saw again in a game released only a year after this one. That game was Sonic 06, and the character we saw with Black Doom's personality traits was Mephiles the Dark.
Mephiles time.
Although Black Doom and Mephiles don't resemble each other physically, their motivations and personalities are incredibly similar. In fact, in the past, people actually used to talk about how Mephiles should have been in Black Doom's place for Shadow the Hedgehog, and some people discussed how replacing Black Doom with Mephiles would barely feel any different. It was basically like how people discussed replacing Infinite with Mephiles in Sonic Forces, except Black Doom was the villain who came first in this case. So, let's break down the similarities between these two villains. First of all, these two are both supernatural entities of some kind. They're not regular organics like humans and animals. Black Doom is an ancient alien who lives with his kind on something known as the Black Comet, which passes by every 50 years. First, he appeared and aided Professor Gerald with creating the ultimate life form, where he was promised the 7 Chaos Emeralds as payment for the next time he passed by. Basically, Gerald figured out he'd die of old age by then, so was going to leave Shadow and Maria to handle his debt. As for Mephiles, it isn't exactly clear what he is. He's a conscience of a greater godlike being known as Solaris, and could be considered a demigod. He isn't as old as Black Doom, as he has only existed as Mephiles for 10 years. But he was created using the original Solaris, the Flame of Hope. It's unknown how long this flame existed for, but considering it was a major part of Soliana culture, it's safe to say that it existed for a long time, maybe for about 100 years at the very minimum. The second obvious thing which connects these two characters is their relationship with Shadow. There have been many villains in the Sonic franchise, and most of them have more interest in Sonic than anyone else, considering he's the titular character. But if you were going to ask any Sonic fan to name one villain more interested in Shadow, then you're going to get one of two answers: Mephiles or Black Doom. Yes, you might also get Infinite as an answer, but let's face it, he didn't spend an entire game harassing Shadow like these two did. Black Doom's obsession with Shadow is very understandable for his character. He is the sole reason Shadow was able to come to life, so he feels like he has control over him. Black Doom can basically be described as Shadow's father, and even though he has no problem in killing Shadow or putting him through severe punishments for disobedience, he would never harm Shadow if he was obedient. In fact, he had a lot of faith in Shadow, and depended on him for the success of the Black Arms. Shadow was essentially like a prince to them. Shadow had a purpose in Black Doom's army, and had a duty to fulfill, which was promised 50 years ago: bring the 7 Chaos Emeralds to Black Doom when the comet passes by the Earth. So it's pretty clear why Black Doom was always whispering in Shadow's ear. Mephiles' connection to Shadow is more complicated than it appears. It looks like he is no different to Black Doom, who wants Shadow on his side as he brings destruction to the Earth. But truthfully, all Mephiles actually wants to do is kill Shadow and get him out of his way. Mephiles has no personal connections to anyone but Shadow, and this personal connection is one of bitterness. He wants to have revenge on Shadow for imprisoning him, and he wants to mentally break him down before he kills him. I think Mephiles might also be slightly afraid of Shadow's power, and he might only hate Shadow more because of the fact that they now resemble each other. So, in summary, Black Doom feels that Shadow owes him his life and loyalty, while Mephiles feels that Shadow is a possible threat to his plans who must also be dealt with in the most horrific way possible. Those are the most obvious resemblances between the two characters. So now it's time to discuss the differences between the two and what makes them better or worse than each other. Now, as much as I wouldn't consider Black Doom to be one of my favourite characters, I do find his personality and motives intriguing. Honestly, I think his design is just boring and like every other alien you could imagine, so that's why he doesn't personally stand out to me. But he is surprisingly fleshed out. We actually get to know about him and his race. We understand his connection with Shadow. We understand that he believes he is punishing humanity for their sins and using them as fodder for his soldiers. And while he is just a rehash of the generic alien invader trend, the fact that he is a cold-hearted alien with a personality just makes him that little bit more interesting and threatening. Mephiles feels like a second attempt at Black Doom, hence the title of this video. I do believe that Black Doom was a prototype version of Mephiles, but what made Mephiles better was that his origins were explored, and he had a more memorable design. Sure, he was just a Shadow recolor, but there was a reason for that, and that reason was again memorable. His crystalline form was also cool. Having a character which was shaped in this typical Sonic design helps in creating a memorable individual, while Black Doom's design was just a bit of a mess. Another aspect of Mephiles' character which made him better than Black Doom was his intelligence. He was smart and manipulative. Black Doom almost seemed naive when dealing with Shadow. But one thing I will say about this is that Mephiles' intelligence doesn't feel as deserved as Black Doom's. Sure, he's supposed to be the mind of Solaris, but it just doesn't feel like he's earned it. He spent 10 years sealed away, and it's still unclear if he has the memories of the Flame of Hope. Assuming he doesn't, Mephiles should barely know anything, because he's essentially only been in existence for 10 years, and those 10 years were spent sealed in the Scepter of Darkness, while Black Doom has existed for thousands of years. Travelling through space with the Black Arms, he has learned, he has explored. Mephiles just sort of knows things because the plot demands it. He knows to go after Silver the Hedgehog in the future so that he can trick him into killing Sonic. He knows everything about Shadow the Hedgehog. He knows about Iblis being sealed inside Princess Elise. He knows how to use a computer. Mephiles, where did you learn? So while Sega certainly made a more cold and calculated character with Mephiles, I do have to say, as much as I love my crystalline child, Black Doom felt like he had a more realistic intelligence level. He actually came across as a wise and ancient creature, while Mephiles just knew things. And of course, we can't not talk about powers. Both of these villains are incredibly powerful, hence why even Shadow struggles against them both. Considering he is one of the most powerful life forms in existence, Black Doom is able to use the Chaos Emeralds to perform chaos control, just like Shadow, and he uses this power to transport Shadow to other locations, including cyberspace. By using all 7 Chaos Emeralds, he could transport the entire Black Comet down to Earth. Black Doom has other smaller powers such as flying, phasing through objects, and using his third eye, better known simply as Doom's Eye, which could be used for long-range communication with characters like Shadow. This eye is able to speak and project holograms of Black Doom, and it seems that these holograms are capable of using Doom's powers. In battle, Black Doom hurls flaming meteors at his opponents, and vertical discs which are capable of cutting through objects to certain extents. He is also able to use an attack known as Swift Strike, which is used like a boomerang, but instead of going through the air, it goes along the floor. Doom can also create illusion copies of himself. And of course, Black Doom can assume the form of Devil Doom, which is his true form. In this form, he still has all of his aforementioned powers, but can also use telekinesis to throw large chunks of debris, can breathe fire, and can summon laser-firing rocks. As for Mephiles, he has the power to shapeshift into liquid and gas forms, but can also solidify himself when taking on the form of someone else, usually doing so by absorbing their shadow. It is mentioned that absorbing shadows increases his power, since he is essentially also taking power from who he is taking the form of. Mephiles has also displayed a level of high speed, which may or may not be an aspect he took from Shadow. One of his most notable powers is the power to travel through time. It's a power that could be compared to Chaos Control, but it seems much more powerful as Mephiles can travel anywhere he wants throughout time, and when travelling through portals, he can take himself to one location, while other characters attempting to pursue him could end up somewhere entirely different. Mephiles has other offensive attacks, such as firing spears of energy from his hand, or summoning balls of dark energy. He was also shown using shockwaves to push back Shadow, Rouge and Omega, and these shockwaves also damaged the ground they stood upon. Oh yeah, Mephiles can also create clones of himself. I'm starting to see a pattern with all of Shadow's villains creating doppelgangers. Plus, Mephiles can also merge into the shadows. He becomes Shadow, making him untouchable in the first battle, until Shadow's chaos energy forced him to expose himself, and in the second battle with Shadow, he created his own pool of shadows, which he disappeared into, and that was a whole new playground for him. It's also worth mentioning that Mephiles is very skilled when using the Chaos Emeralds. He uses them to give others visions, such as when Silver saw Sonic standing in the flames, and can use them to blind people, which is how he distracted Sonic and Elise before he killed Sonic. Mephiles can even draw all the other Chaos Emeralds to himself when he only has one in his possession. Finally, Mephiles can assume other forms. In his second battle with Shadow, by absorbing his shadows, which have been strengthened by his 2 Chaos Emeralds, Mephiles can assume a large monstrous form, and obviously, by fusing with Iblis, he can assume his complete form, which is Solaris. So both villains are incredibly powerful, although I will note that Black Doom definitely has a more aggressive set of powers, while Mephiles has a wider range. He uses the Chaos Emeralds more effectively than Black Doom, and has quite a few powers which he can use without having any emeralds at all. However, while Mephiles is skilled at using the emeralds, Black Doom mostly has powers which require no emeralds. Even his transformation into Devil Doom requires no Chaos Emeralds, while Mephiles used 2 emeralds to assume his monstrous shadow form and needed all 7 to become Solaris. To end this, we must talk about what would happen if these 2 characters were to meet and fight. Mephiles would win. While Mephiles does depend on the Chaos Emeralds more than Doom does, and while some of his powers also come from Shadow, he still has a wider range of abilities. Black Doom is very aggressive with his attacks, and doesn't have a solid defense, while Mephiles has plenty of offensive and defensive abilities. I'm actually convinced that Mephiles could defeat Devil Doom without needing to transform into Solaris. I mean, let's face it, Solaris is an overpowered form which literally tears apart time and space, so bringing it into any battle is unfair. Mephiles was able to one-shot Sonic with only one of his attacks. So if he were in battle where he was going all out, I imagine that he'd win. Although, he would need the Chaos Emeralds to ensure his victory, since they strengthen all of his powers. It is worth noting that Devil Doom was defeated by Shadow in his super form, which means that regular Shadow wouldn't be able to defeat him. But Mephiles can defeat Shadow, so we can still say that Mephiles can beat Devil Doom. So what's the overall conclusion to this video? Which character is ultimately the best? Well, honestly, I can't say. Black Doom came before Mephiles, and genuinely does feel like a prototype version of the character. Mephiles just doesn't feel as out of place, and fits into the story better, and I think the only reason he can be considered better than Black Doom is because Black Doom came first. Otherwise, Mephiles would have turned out to be a completely different character, so he wouldn't be the way he was without Black Doom. So both villains are worthy of respect. This video was really supposed to be an introduction to the character who inspired Mephiles. But there will be 3 more parts to this miniseries, talking about characters which came after him, and what their fates were. I'll see you in the next one. I hope you guys are enjoying Mephiles month so far. I'm Lord Danny, signing out.